on my computer. Here we go. It actually said recording in progress. I don't know if I already hit the record button. I don't think I did. Hey, folks, it's the Repurpose Ice Hockey Podcast. I'm Nick Rothwell, and joining me today is Martin Smith, a good old buddy of mine. And today we're going to talk about Martin's journey from falling in love with the game to his career in the UK with a few teams, and then to that inevitable time of hanging up the skate, which is really at the root of what this podcast is all about. Thanks for joining me, Martin. How you doing, brother?
Thanks, Nick. I'm doing well, and it's good to see you in person after quite a few years. I know we talked on the phone a few years ago to catch up, but yeah, it's great to see you.
Isn't it? Do you know what? I've done a few of these now, Martin, and it's just catching up with guys who, maybe I haven't talked to or seen in 20 years. But it is honestly, it's just like you don't miss a beat. I'm seeing your face. My heart is just warm with happiness. I can't wait to talk to you over the next hour or so and have a good old catch up. But I really appreciate you joining me today.
No, it's good, and you talk about how no time has passed, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I was in 2018, my wife and I went back to the UK for the first time since the late 90s when I was playing there, and getting together with my buddies in Telford and Manchester. It was like no time had passed. It was surreal.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I wonder if it's a. I'd like to think it's a hockey thing, but I've never really heard anybody talk about it in other sports. So I'm going to keep it a hockey thing and a hockey family thing, and we just won't talk about anything else.
Yeah, I think you're
Um,
right. I think you're right.
yeah, yeah. So Martin, the format of this is that we're going to break your hockey story into three periods. Keep it hockey like. First period, first 20, we're just going to talk about, you falling in love with the game, minor hockey in Saskatchewan. And then all of a sudden your trip over to the UK and your development of your pro career. And then those special times in the UK, because I know there are many special times for the guys that talk about playing hockey in the UK is a very amazing experience. And then in that third period, we're going to talk about, life after hockey because it's something that's close to my heart. Like the challenges that a lot of athletes go through when we hang up the skates. And I'm not sure about your journey. I know a little bit about it, hanging up the skates, but we'll get into it in the third period. And then if anything crops up, of course, like a good old hockey game, we have some overtime.
Right on. Yeah, I'm ready
All
to
right,
go.
all right. So I'm going to. I keep saying it. I need to get a digital clock with a countdown on it for a period and a big hooter to go off. But for now, it's just a 20-minute countdown on my phone. So let's hit it. 20 minutes. Let's drop the puck. Martin, tell us what hockey was like for you growing up. When did you first step on the ice? What were those memories like? Growing up as a little kid, playing hockey or being introduced to hockey. How did it all happen for you?
Well, for me, people ask, how did you get involved in hockey when your parents were both from the UK? I mean, my dad was from Scotland. He was born in Perth. Mom was born in the Newcastle area. Dad was a doctor. Mom was a nurse. They ended up over in Canada working in a small town called Edam. And um, I have a picture of myself on my first birthday in the Winter Carnival on skates. So I guess that's as far back as I can go with picture proof. But I was a year old in the Winter Carnival, local community. Started playing hockey. I think by the age of 4, 5, I was playing with 8 and 9 and 10-year olds because there's not a lot of kids in a small town. When I talk small town, if you talk small town with people maybe in the UK or the US, they're thinking, it's 5,000 people. No, there was 400 people in our community. So it was small. We had a nice ice rink. And I got playing minor hockey there, and it was about getting on the ice all the time. We also had natural ice. We didn't have artificial ice, so the ice didn't go in till usually that third week in November, and it was gone if you were lucky, at the end of March. if it stayed
Mhm.
cold enough. So,
So that, of
you know,
course, everyone knows that is atmospheric freezing. That is being frozen from the temperatures in the plains of Saskatchewan. No refrigeration systems, all Mother Nature.
exactly. And then speaking of mothers, my mom, everybody thought it was my dad for years, but it was my mom who flooded the back garden, and we had a rink in our backyard. So after school, if you didn't have practice at the rink, the kids were on our backyard rink, and we were playing for the Stanley Cup. Like that's how it was. And so even at the end of the winter when you couldn't skate on it anymore, it was kind of getting slushy and stuff, it was boot hockey. And then it
Yeah.
became driveway. We had a pretty big driveway, or there was a tennis court in our town, so we played tennis court hockey. Like, it was hockey all the time, with some stops in between for baseball. But I mean, that was it. It was hockey, 24/7.
So, for people to understand, like, small town Saskatchewan, and I'm from Pontex, so that's down by Swift Current. I think the population is probably less than 400. I think
Yeah.
it's really teeny tiny. And I too, my parents were from the UK, and they immigrated out there. And I'm just wondering too, what's the mentality of your parents to be immigrants in Saskatchewan? I don't know if you know anything of it, but of them wanting to get their children involved in the community. Hockey is so much part of the community. Kind of describe what it is like, what your memories were like in the early years of hockey community, and the things that you remember of what parents would talk about, and how they would want maybe kind of plan careers for their kids, or whether or not it was just really about community. And then I want to get into the playing for the Stanley Cup too. So let's go into all of that. Those the idea of like hockey and community in small towns.
Sure. So when my dad, he answered an ad to come to Canada, to the small town of Saskatchewan, and be their doctor, he was about being involved in the community. So over the years, my dad was the mayor for many years of the town. He was the rink board president. He was in the Lions Club. He was on the board of trade. He was a scout leader, like everything, right into the community. And mom, no different, volunteered for different groups, and became very, very involved. Also, dad was involved in the baseball association, and then dad became president of what was called the Big Four Hockey League. That was the senior hockey league, very similar to one of the lower leagues in the UK. Um, and at that time, he was also, as I became older, became involved in my hockey team and then my younger sister's hockey team. And so, I mean, it was all about community. So when you know he he just wanted to be involved. He wanted to help out in any way he could. I know my dad was instrumental, and this is, you can relate to this, being in the UK with rinks that have netting. He was instrumental in getting plexiglass in our
Mm.
arena, and I think it was 1985. It was all about being a part of the community, and he instilled that in us. And in fact, I've done 4 years as on the rink board in Edam, and I just came off 2 years as president. So now somebody else has got the job, and I'm still on the board. So it's funny how it's kind of come full circle. So I'm
How did
sure I
how did
got
the
that
other
from him.
how did the other kids look at you? I mean, obviously your parents spoke with an accent, so I'm interested to know, and then they're really involved in the community, and obviously if they're influential in the community, that means their kids get. I'm not saying you would get preferential treatment, but I would imagine a lot of kids would be like, "Hey, how did they look at you? How did the kids look at you that you
Well,
remember anyway?"
Well, because I was born in North Battleford, because at that time, my dad being a doctor couldn't deliver his own son. So that was the closest hospital. But, basically the kids loved listening to my dad talk and
Mm,
loved listening to my mom talk. And, they were always looked upon as, I mean, for my dad, nowadays you could wait 2-3 weeks to get in to see a doctor, and that might be in a good month. My dad used to go to your house, being
mm.
in a small town. So people knew him on such a personal level, between mom and dad, that I always was treated very well. And then I think the fact that, it was our upbringing and um, the fact that we had neighbors that were older hockey players that really took me under their wing, and um, it's just such a family atmosphere in a small town, as you know, and I think that once you start playing hockey and excelling at hockey, then you get some different a different kind of attention, I guess, because then there's talk about maybe he can go somewhere, or maybe there's some people that say, oh, once there's body contact or once he plays with bigger players, he won't be able to do that anymore. Um, but I mean, for the most part, I mean, I go back. I live, you know, 20 minutes from my hometown now, and I'm there a lot. And because of the way I was treated, I want to give back to the community. So I have nothing but good memories.
So how were you treated then with regards to the fact that I'm imagining you're alluding to the fact that you're quite skilled, and people were saying, "Oh, wait until he gets a little bit bigger." So how quickly were your hockey skills developing, and when did you start to know that you're actually really good at this game, and not just someone who's going to take part?
Well, I knew when probably, I know it sounds crazy, maybe 4 or 5, like because I was on the ice all the time, I think that I was maybe ahead of, the other kids in terms of development. Um, and then even as I got older, like I would be skating with like the men. It didn't matter to me because I know I used to sneak my equipment down at 10 years old to skate with the senior hockey team. And I remember getting run over one night and coming home, and I wasn't hurt or anything, but then mom and dad had heard about it and they said no more going out with the senior hockey team. So I mean, um, right from day one, I wanted to go as far as I could. But here's the funny thing: growing up in a small town, and it would be like, being in Telford, one of the places that I played, is that when you're growing up, you're not watching the National Hockey League. You're watching the Telford Tigers. Well, in Edam, I was watching the Edam Three Stars. I wanted to play for the Edam Three Stars. That was what I wanted to do. Because back then, you used to get one game a week on TV, and that was Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada. It's not like now where every game is televised. And so those were your heroes. So those were the guys you looked up to. And so for me, that was my goal, was to play for the Three Stars.
What are your memories like going to the local rink and watching them play? I know that I've spoken a couple of times about me going down and watching Saskatoon Blades in the old barn. I don't know if you ever went to
I
Saskatoon in the
played in there,
80s.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
did. I
those
played in the old barn, yeah.
trying to describe people the sounds of the pucks on the boards in the most unique noise ever in that place. But I remember going down there like 10, 11, 12, sneaking in, waiting to the end of the first period, and then trying to get down to lower seats in the rink. So, seeing where guys didn't come and their seats were available, and watching guys play. And I was in the Cooperall age too, and they had the pants,
Yeah.
and just remembering, I can really remember the sounds again because the barn was just very unique. But just I don't know, I remember the concrete steps. I remember like popcorn being on the steps. I remember little things, and then just the noise, and almost like I would get shiver up my back just thinking about the guys. When I was like going up into for intermissions and stuff, and you'd feel all this stuff. It was just this buzz, and I didn't even know what it was, Martin. I couldn't describe it. I just felt this. I can remember the smells.
Yeah.
Like I said, so what are your memories of going and watching the EDAM Three Stars and being in that rink at a young age?
Well, it's funny because we were talking about this last night. Is I used to go into the dressing room, fill up the water bottles, and that sort of stuff. So it was the smell of them curving sticks, because you used to have
Mm,
a blowtorch there in the wooden sticks, and then they would heat up the stick, put it underneath the door, and put a little more curve on it. That's one smell. The other was walking into the rink and the smell of popcorn, because they had a popcorn machine. They don't have that anymore. So, the smell of the popcorn always, and a lot of senior games were Wednesday nights or Friday or Saturday nights. So it was like, and a lot of Wednesday games. Like now, the season is, I think they're playing 16 games this year. Well, back then you used to play over 30. Like, so
mm.
there's a lot of games. So I mean, those memories stick out in my head so much. The other thing is there was no Zamboni. So I used to take my skates to the rink with my buddies. Between periods, we had big scrapers. We would push them, clean the ice, put the snow in a pile, and then the caretaker would, huck the snow over the boards. There'd be no flood until after the game. So those were the memories that I have of being at the senior game. The other one is a good friend of ours. He's actually still alive. He's over 100 years old. He was in the he's still in the long-term care home that my mom was in till just over a year ago when she passed away. But he was the announcer, and
Mm.
that voice, like even when he talks, if I talk to him when I'm in Edam, it brings me back to that rink. And so, I mean, just those things will always stand out in my mind.
I just remember, that term rink rats, and just a bunch of feral kids, like we would be like to the age like 10, 11, 12. Parents wouldn't know where we were. We would, like I say, sneak into the rink, wait for the seats to come available, go and just no. I'm not saying nobody cared, but it was just this. It was a carefree because people just they're down at the rink. They're not creating any harm, and we
Right.
did. We got up to a bit of mischief. We went around where the snow got dumped out, and we would have snowball fights, and
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
hit cars that we weren't meant to be hitting, and hit people like in the crowd and stuff outside. That were outside for having cigarettes and stuff. So we got up to a little bit of mischief, but those buddies, they didn't go on to play hockey, but I remember them really well, and I just remember the idea of friendship.
Yeah.
Um, so can you describe some of the friendships that you had at those ages, and then maybe how you started to progress into league hockey?
Well, so I had one buddy that I hung around with all the time, and and even before I move on to that, even getting back to the rink caretaker was smart at that time because he used to get us to sweep underneath the bleachers, and he used to get us to clean the dressing rooms, sweep up the tape and stuff, and then he would say we could skate, even though at the time we didn't know that. But I mean, now I know that you could have just gone whenever. But there was times there used to be a barrel, and it had a rag on the front. So at night we could skate late, but the two of us or more friends would scrape the ice, and then we'd flood it with this barrel. And so, for him and I, um, and he was a good hockey player too. And um, but he was, as a forward, he just felt one year we needed a goaltender, and I think we were probably about 9 or 10 when he said, "I'm going in net." So it was perfect for me. I had somebody to shoot on all the time. And he actually, like, he ended up making, like, we in I guess our first year bantam, we came to North Battleford, which is 40 minutes away from Edam, and to play on which would have been the double A team, or the development team, the traveling team. And so at that time, not many kids would move from a small town, not move, but drive back and forth from a small town to the city to play. It was kind of frowned upon a little bit, like where you'd left your own team and your friends.
Mm.
So I was still living in Edam and going to school. So I know there was a transition period there where that was tough. He ended up not sticking it out, and then he went back home to play, where I continued on and ended up, that was really my last year Pee Wee, which I mean now is called U13, would have been the last year that I played in Edam in minor hockey, because then my hockey career started going on to what was bantam, and then midget, but U18, and then junior, and so on. So um but that's where it kind of you know took off, was after when I moved to play bantam in North
So
Battleford.
tell us what that was like, and I'll tell you about my experiences going to North Battleford to play.
Well, at first I remember going to camp, and because I had played against North Battleford teams all the way growing up, and for a small town, like, we did pretty well against the Battleford teams. And 'cause the difference between playing in a city and playing in a small town, in a small town, you go to school with those your teammates, you play school sports with your teammates, you play hockey, you play baseball, like, you can their tendencies, everything. But in a city where there might be 10 teams, well, those players don't play together all the time. They don't all go to school together. You know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
for us small towns, we could come in and really do well against the team. So I come into training camp or to tryouts, and they know who I am, because of from playing against me. So of course we come in and there's contact now in bantam for first year. So now they're trying to take runs at you. So not only are you trying to hang on to the puck, you're trying, and then as you get to where you make the team, um, then you're accepted a lot more. But I remember the first actual game I played in Bantam. We were playing in Prince Albert, and they had a big team. And I was coming down the boards, and this guy hit me, knocked me out cold. It's probably one of my first concussions I ever had. But back then, you used to play a game there was
Hmm.
two teams in Prince Albert. You used to play in the morning against one team, and then late afternoon against the other. And I was knocked out in the morning, and then in the afternoon, like you lay on the bus and try to recuperate. And then I played later on that day. Nobody knew anything, about
Hmm.
concussions. You got your bell rung, keep your
Yeah.
head up next time. Like
Yeah.
that's how it was. So anyway, those are my early memories of playing, development hockey. But um, after that, I definitely kept my head up and
Yeah.
continued on.
Like my North Battleford is always renowned as being a very hard place to go play. Really hard nosed, tough guys. So like I don't know if you remember a guy. His last name was Faneuf, and I think it was Paul, and he was in playing in Junior B around the late '80s,
Uh-huh.
and just tough farm boys. Like if I could
Yeah.
describe that to people, just guys who would, if you were wearing a face mask, they would punch right through it. Like you could, and as they're doing, I remember the knuckles coming, and like you saw the knuckles and the flesh spreading apart, and then just really tough guys. So for a guy like you, growing up in North Battleford, systems. What was it like? What are your memories of like? Because like I say, guys coming from Saskatoon, we would always. It wasn't like we were scared, but we knew we were going to have our hands full playing against the Battleford team. So were you guys kind of bred as being just tough by nature? We're going to be tough, and we're going to see what happens.
I think part of it was, as you got older, you did have kids from like a lot of farming backgrounds. They were tough kids that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
went home from school and worked hard. And um, so there was that mentality. I know it's still like that in the smaller communities. Like you know, it it's they're just tough farm kids. And not saying that the kids that live in the city are any different, but that's how it was growing up. And I remember even, back then you played for a junior team like, like the North Battleford North Stars. Um, there was a lot of local players on that team back then or from the area. Now it's not so much like that. You don't have as many now because they have drafts. Kids will get drafted and end up in other communities. But back then it was very local. So I remember going into Lloydminster for a game. It was an exhibition game or a preseason game before the regular season started. And the caretaker had just thrown the nets out onto the ice. Well, they were on our side, and Lloydminster wouldn't come and get the nets because we had a tough team.
Mm-hmm.
And the refs finally had to come down and said, "Would you give them a net?" Like, you know. so so in you know, piggybacking off what you're saying, like, yeah, like that's how it
Yeah,
was. And I know that there was always that intimidation factor. I always felt like that going into Prince Albert, like that there,
yeah,
it was tough and you were, and it's funny because I'm coaching a U15 AA team this season, and last Friday we went into Prince Albert, and they're big and they're strong, and like it was just like nothing, no time had passed except for I was
yeah,
standing behind the bench instead of on the ice.
yeah, yeah. Prince Albert. Now, did you guys ever get scared going into Saskatoon, or were we not scary?
Mm, I know playing the Saskatoon Raiders in Bantam, they were good and
Yeah,
they were
yeah,
tough and they were strong. Yeah. And there was
yeah.
different, yeah, I mean, different zones that you would play against. When you play against the Contacts and Blazers, like once you got to AAA, um, yeah, like there was, I think you just knew that you had to move your feet because I mean, back then, um, the bigger defensemen don't skate like they do now, but if they could catch and grab you. and they would hold you, and they would beat you, and and they
Yeah.
would punish you. And so there was always teams like that, like especially
Mm.
the Blazers and contacts. Contacts were always kind of a little bit tougher, I think, that
Yeah.
they rougher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember those Raiders too. That and they had some good guys. Like a couple of brothers. What were their names? I remember Jeff
Pryle.
Rosner. He was the
Oh yeah.
Pryle brothers.
Pryle
Yeah.
brothers. I
And
actually coach against Sean Pryle this year. We haven't played them
mm,
yet, but he coaches Martinsville, just outside
yeah,
Saskatoon. So yeah, Jeff Rosner, he
Jeff
was.
Rosner.
You didn't want to
He was a
get tied
pit
up
bull.
against
Yeah.
the boards against him. No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of your falling in love with the game, and let's talk about like just quickly that jump to junior, and then where you actually make a decision to go, hey, I'm gonna give hockey a go and try to make a pro career.
Well, the team was sold to a private owner when I was 16, a guy named Norm Johnson, very tough, no nonsense coach. And we only had three returnees coming back from the year before. Um, so I got an opportunity at 16 and made the team. And then my junior career took off. I was in a good situation because we didn't have many returning players, that I got a really good opportunity um, to play the power play, to play with good players. And back then, both my wingers were 6'4", and they cleared the tracks for me, and I was lucky, and I had some success as a 16-year-old, and then continued on from there.
Let's end the first period, Martin. We'll have our first intermission. I only ever have one intermission because I'm interested to know what was your, everyone has their own little routines and things that they got up to. I've spoken to guys, that they would sneak outside. We played in the day where they'd go outside for a quick cigarette, a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But what was your intermission routine? What would you do between the breaks
You
or
know,
between the periods? Sorry.
from what I did then to what I did, because I played senior hockey 2 years ago, and I was actually 50. I just turned 51 when I played my last senior game, and anyway, I did the same thing. So I always take my top stuff off, and I'd retape my stick. I'd undo my skates, and I'd always take the tape off my shin pads because I didn't like them to be tight when I was sitting there. So guys used to bug me all the time how much tape I went through, but yeah, I had to retape my stick. That was one thing that I stopped doing later on in my career. I didn't care about whether the tape was on my stick, as long as it wasn't. If it was ripped, I had to replace it. But my shin pads, retie my skates. Oh yeah, like same thing all the time. Go to the bathroom. Um, and even big games, like I remember some games in Manchester, and for me, my nervous part was going to the bathroom. I had to go, like, I don't know how many times, and I didn't drink much water. I don't know
No,
why, but
I,
that was my nervous tick, I guess.
yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I've never really known. I knew no, I was the only guy who would always go pee in between the breaks, and I'm going, why is no
Yeah,
one else going? And I didn't drink a ton of water. I mean, like a half bottle. I wasn't a big glugger, and I would always go wee, and I was just like, why am I? But I'm glad that we have another thing
yeah,
in common, Martin. We both
yeah.
pee
It
a
was
lot.
nerves. I
Yeah,
couldn't. I had to. It was like I couldn't play if I
I
had a
think that
full
was it. I was
bladder.
like, well, I also got into this thing. I don't want to carry the extra weight.
Yeah.
I started to
Well,
get slower and slower. So let's just shed everything I
yeah.
could shed. Yeah,
I
yeah.
was always worried that what happens if it comes on to, and then I was never ever, and never have I ever done this, is leave the bench to go during a game. Like there's
No,
no
no,
way,
no.
so.
I know one goalie, and I won't say his name, but I played with him in Sheffield and with the Steelers, and I remember during warm up, and I remember looking over him, and he was looking up, and he was kind of just almost like meditating, and I was like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Shh," and I was like, "What's up?" And he was peeing his pants.
No way.
And I was
No
like, "What are
way.
you doing?" He goes, "It helps me warm up my groin."
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they never said, they always say goalies are a little bit odd, a little bit different. So.
Yeah, that was a bit odd, but anyway, let's get to the second period, Martin. I'm gonna enjoy this one as we talk about your pro career. Let's drop the puck. Let's talk about you, making that decision to go pro, and then quickly, your career pro in North America, and then, what made you make that jump over to Trafford?
Well, when I was in my last year at junior, I got a call from a guy that I don't know if he was coaching the Nipawin Hawks in the league that I was playing in at the time here in Saskatchewan, or I think he had played overseas, but he knew Darren Dirtle, and so
Mm-hmm.
Darren Dirtle, like I mean, very famous defenseman, played over in the UK for years, very good defenseman. I remember playing against, played the whole game, didn't even come off once. Um, so so they had heard that my dad, well, they heard his accent, and then they, of course, word got around and they contacted me. So then I started working on getting my British passport, which didn't take long at all because our local member of parliament was going to Ottawa, and for some reason I had all the papers. My dad gave me all the papers I needed, gave them to him, had them all signed off, and he was in Ottawa for 4 days. He came back, he had my passport, my British passport. So anyway, that's how I got that. And then, so then I had got a call we had gone down to Boston to play in a tournament after the season, my 20-year-old year of junior. And I was scouted by the Richmond Renegades, which were a farm team for the New York Islanders. So I signed with them. And then I ended up getting an agent who um, he said go to Milwaukee because there was the American League and the International Hockey League. So the IHL had a team in Milwaukee. They were independent. He said you might have a better chance making an independent team without affiliation. If it doesn't work out, you just go back to Richmond. So that's what I did. And Milwaukee actually ended up wanting to send me to Columbus, their farm team. I said, I'm already under contract with Richmond of the East Coast Hockey League. So then I went to Richmond. The regret I have at that time, and I understand the thought process of my agent, and my agent is now the GM of the Florida Panthers. So he knew what he was talking about. But I got a call to go to New York Islanders camp, and I didn't. And I think it was just rookie camp. It wasn't like full on main camp. And he said, well, you're already signed in the organization, so it'd be better to go to Milwaukee. So that's what I did. I went to Milwaukee, ended up in Richmond, and played there. And then I tore my MCL, and I missed. I I think I missed maybe 3-4 weeks. Had arthroscopic surgery, and then that kind of put me back till the end of the year. I had a decent year that year. Um, ended up playing 40 games. I think I had, close to 20 goals. So it wasn't bad. But then I thought, England's starting to call now because I have this passport. Now the word's out, and Trafford had found out, the Trafford Metros. So I ended up going to Trafford my second year pro.
So
So that's how.
who got in contact with you? What was the flight over, and what was it like when you first saw the rink?
So Roy Warren was in charge of the
Mm-hmm.
Trafford Metro. So he ended up contacting me. And I remember it was all, we did talk on the phone, but everything, they would fax it to my dad's office. My dad would bring it home at noon. Like, it was just all like that. So anyways, I end up going over to Trafford, and I remember walking in the rink, and like I thought it was a cool old barn in Altrincham. Um, but it had the netting. I'd never seen that before. And so that was a little bit different. And I remember, going to see three different places, before I picked a flat to live, which I was really worried about driving. So I picked the place closest to the rink, and it was close to downtown Altrincham, so I could walk for groceries, or I could walk to the rink if I wanted. But I mean, it didn't take long before I was driving and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, and the rink, the atmosphere that year, Roy, I don't know how it all went down, and I may be totally wrong with this, but basically there was a disagreement between the ice rink and our team, and we ended up having to go to Bradford every Tuesday and Thursday night for practice. But the imports and the guys that weren't working or were available, we used to go to Blackburn every
Mm-hmm.
day for practice in the morning. So we would practice Tuesday, Thursdays twice a day. And Frank Morris was our player coach. So we were like, training every day, plus training Tuesday, Thursdays twice a day, plus running stairs in Blackburn. Like we were go, go, go. We were gung ho. And but it was just what I remember that first year was so much traveling,
Yeah.
because we didn't have a home rink. So actually somebody put a sign on on the rink, instead of the home of the Trafford Metros, it had home of the Trafford Nomads, because
Yeah.
we had no home rink. But it was exciting. It was just different hockey. I remember getting hit into the netting before we ended up not playing in Altrincham anymore, but my helmet got caught in the netting, and I'm trying to get my helmet away. But then we played our home games in Bradford on the above the bingo hall on the second story of I think the Bradford, what are they called, Bradford Bulldogs or something, where
I
I
think
don't know
so.
if that
Yeah.
rink's
Yeah.
still there. Yeah, but
A lot.
so we
Yeah.
played out of that rink mostly that
I,
first year.
I remember a game I played in Solihull, and Luke Shabbat had hit
Hmm.
me in the top of my helmet, and my visor came down and knocked out my tooth. And I remember I was skating down the ice. I was like spitting out bits of my tooth, and the nerve was hanging out, and it hurt like hell. And I remember thinking, "I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him." And I remember getting behind the net, and I grabbed him around the throat. And I'm bending him over the boards, and I just took my stick and I was going to jam it in his throat. I wanted to knock out his teeth, and he was looking at me like I was. He didn't know, because I didn't want him to know that he knocked out my tooth. And I remember going like this, and all of a sudden my stick stopped. And I was like, "What's going on?" And I looked up, and it's through the netting. The fans had a hold of my stick. So without that netting and fans grabbing sticks, I would have knocked out Luke Shabbat's two front teeth.
Was Chartrand waiting to get in there too? Because they were a package deal all the time. They were a pretty good 1-2 punch. But I do know
They
Luke
were,
Shabbat was a wanted man. Lots
yeah.
of
Well, I
games.
don't like. We ended up playing with the Guildford Flames the next year, and he was like, "Dude, what was going on with you?" I was like, "You knocked out my tooth." And he's like, I didn't know, I didn't know. And I didn't, I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want him to know that he knocked out my tooth. And he was going, "Yeah, where are you going all nuts on me?" But he apologized anyway. We ended up becoming roommates. So it's a great thing of hockey. But I do love those old rinks. And there's just something about that atmosphere. And I think that, obviously Manchester got the MEN Arena that they named at that time.
Yeah.
So there was like you in Trafford, and what happened? How did you end up in that big, beautiful arena?
Well, this is a weird story because, closer to the end of the year when I was in, uh, well, actually, after my year in Richmond, I got a job like just outside North Battleford, um, in a town called Wilkie, and I worked there at their wheat pool elevator for the summer, and I was planning on playing senior hockey in Wilkie, and so, anyways, I get a call. It was start of September, and it was through some friends that I met when I was with Trafford, and they said, this Manchester Storm's starting up, and they've got a team going, and Johnny Lawless has come from Cardiff, and um, so, anyways, it ended up somehow he got my number, and he called me, and they were already like I remember leaving. It was about September, third week of September, and I joined the team and ended up joined the team. My first game was in Milton Keynes, and I think we ended up beating Milton Keynes 9-4. And the team had kind of been struggling a bit before I got there. And I ended up having a really good game, got a couple goals, and then it just kind of took off from there. And then we ended up getting Sean Byram. Then we added John Finney in net, and I mean, we just continued to get better and better. But it wasn't till getting to play in the 9X arena, like it was just like wow, like it was crazy. And
Wow.
I still say my favorite year of hockey out of all the years I played was that first year in Manchester. It was phenomenal.
So would I have played, because I was in Guildford, I think, that year. So would I have played against you, or would you have been there? Because I know Byram was there. He
Yeah,
was
you
there when
played
I played
against
up.
me there. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember I got into a fight with some kid. He had a face mask on. I think he had a North American accent. And
Steph Barton, probably. I think it was Steph Barton.
I remember I think it was like Johnny Lawless was like, go bug Rothwell. And I remember getting into a fight with this kid. And all I remember was your jerseys, his name bar came off the back. And I had his name in my hand and I threw it up over the glass. And I got in a lot of trouble for that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's who it was because when you say a kid, we had a young player. He was actually born in the UK but never really lived there, lived in Edmonton.
Yeah.
And he's still on we still, there's the odd time we'll still contact, there's a few of
Yeah.
us still on Facebook that we stay in contact with. But I'm thinking that that's probably who it was. But we assembled a team that year. I think we only lost, I want to say,
Oh
5
yeah,
games all year. Like we
you
were.
guys killed us. And we had a pretty good team then. I know we were really poorly coached, and I don't want to make any excuses because we stopped playing for that guy like, but we had a really good team, and none of us could really get to gel. But I do remember the two games that we played against you in our place and your place, and you just killed us both times. And I know, like, I think you had Hilton Ruggles too, and Johnny Lawless, and like you said, Sean Byram, and there was some, I want to say Daryl Lipsy. Was he up there by then?
He was
Was he up
playing, yeah.
there? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I played on a line with Hilton Ruggles and Sean Byram, and I'd always played center. And Sean came in, and I moved to right wing, being a left-handed shot, and I played there for the rest of my career. Was on right wing. I learned more from Sean Byram than I did from lots of coaches that I played for. A lot
Yeah.
of things that I still preach to the players that I coach.
Like
Um,
what were some of the things that you learned from him?
so so he would say, going through the neutral zone, stay wide. Stay wide. Don't shrink the rink. So there was lots of times where I would go. I mean, I ran into the boards at the start because he'd say, "Stay wide, stay wide, stay wide," and so he would feed me, and he said you would either beat the defenseman wide, or you could turn up and then hit me late. And of course Hilton would go to the net.
Hmm.
And because I mean Hilton could score, like he looked like a big clumsy skater, but he actually was pretty fast, and we complemented each other really well. And the other thing was Sean really preached move the puck. Move the puck. You're in the open, move the puck. And you see some highlights of when we played, and there was a lot of backdoor goals where, it was just unselfish play between, our line, setting up a guy on the back door. But he was a competitor. But there was just so many little things and I roomed with him my second year, and obviously talked hockey a lot and learned a lot from him.
I was really fortunate to play for the Sheffield Steelers in their first season when they had the new arena there, and like we broke all records. And there was even, I think, for the Sheffield Arena, we still hold the record because it was one time they could put stands against that black curtain. They could put stands in there, and I think we
Right.
had like nearly 12,000 people for a game against Sunderland, which we won like 34-2 or something. But so it was just an amazing, just something that I'm always going to remember, being part of that inaugural season in the lower division. Where you've got all these people coming who've never watched a hockey game before, and the woo woos, and they just went nuts for it. What was it like? First of all, there must have been. Did you feel a lot of pressure? That first season in the storm shelter. I know it wasn't even a couple of seasons later that you guys had the largest attendance for a hockey game around the world. I remember because I think it was a Sky game, and we had like over 17,000 people, which in the
Right.
NHL, I think no teams were playing that had that amount of capacity that night. So that night, you guys broke all the records for attendance of hockey around the world, which was like amazing. But did you what was it? Yeah. So again, just tell me what it was like in that first year, with the fans and going into that arena, and you just feel playing in a big arena, you just feel it. It's ominous. It's beautiful.
There was a lot of pressure, for sure. And I think the reason why we ended up getting so many supporters was because we were personable.
Mm.
And we used to go after games, we would go across the street called to a place called Cathedral Arches, and they would put on a meal for us, and then we would mingle with the fans. And it would be, as the season went on, it was 45 minutes to get to the Arches, which was across the street, because you were signing, programs and signing, um, hockey jerseys and everything else. But we were personable, and people could relate to us. And then it got to the point where they were saying like, you were shit tonight. Like, they felt more comfortable. So there was that pressure. Um, and and I think just the expectation, like they didn't put a team there just to compete. Like that team was to win. We were owned by the Ottawa Senator. This like it was called Ogden Entertainment, but they owned Ottawa Senators, Anaheim Mighty Ducks. They had new rinks in both those, both in Ottawa and Anaheim, as well as Manchester. So there was a lot of pressure to perform every night. And then plus you're thinking, okay, well next year we want to get promoted. You want a contract for next year as well, because it was only there were only 1 year contracts. I think maybe Johnny had a 2 year contract, but there was a lot of pressure, but it was good pressure because we knew losing, like not winning the championship, was a failed year. So there was an expectation. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't know about this team. So we would practice a lot of times in Altrincham. It'd be 6 in the morning, but we would stay around till 10 o'clock because there was a lady named Rose that had the cafeteria there, and she'd make, bacon and eggs, and we would sit around and talk hockey and talk everything and have tea. And like it was we were a family. We really were. And so at practice, we always played the same teams. We would do our warm up the goaltenders, and then it was scrimmage. We scrimmaged all the time. We didn't work on the power play. We scrimmaged. We had a trophy that was made, and we presented it after every game and or
Amazing.
every scrimmage. And that's what we did. So guys looked forward to going to practice. If you wanted to work on a few things, you'd maybe stay out a little bit later. But I mean, for the most part, it was just scrimmage, and it was intense. And like I said, the same teams all year. Like our line would play, I think the second line was I want to say Mark Stokes, Davey Smith, and Daryl Lipsy. And then there was Hilton and Sean and I. And the defense were split up and the goalies were split up. And oh yeah, she was a full-on war. And and that's what we did. It wasn't like we were working on different things of the game.
Was it fun though?
It was, and
Yeah.
that probably made it the most fun. But and we lived probably 10 minutes from the Altrincham rink, and I know Sean and I, like when we went to practice there, like we were like there was times you dress in your equipment at home and then just go to the rink like half dressed. But it was 6 in the morning. Nobody was on the road. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean those things, like you just I'll never forget those. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
such a fun year. And then the atmosphere, and then other things that came along with it. Like, you know, people, like I always talk about the game we played against Paisley, and we're down, I think it was 7-3. There's like 9 minutes to go. Anyway, we claw our way back to 7-6. And then there's, just over a minute left, and Daryl Lipsy, or sorry, one of our players came to the bench, and I went, and Johnny Lawless was player coach at that first year, and he hops the boards, and then I'm already going out, so then I stop, and he goes, "No, go, go, go." So I ended up going right from the bench to the slot. Daryl Lipsy hit me, and I took a snapshot and scored over the goalie's glove side. And there was 10,000 fans there, and you'd have thought there was 20,000. The roof came off that place, and when when you talk about most memorable goals, that's one of the, like it wasn't a game winner, it was just a tying goal. We didn't win the game. We ended up tying it, but that goal and that atmosphere is just, something I'll never forget. And
Beautiful.
I mean, winning the championship was good, but the roof came off when we tied that because it was just the
Yeah.
momentum, of the comeback and everything else like that was really good. It was just such a fun time. It was really good.
I love it. I love it. We're kind of coming. Well, we are coming to the end of our 20-minute second period. So I want to get into the Super League. What was that like? How did things change? Were you under Kurt Kleinendorf that 1 year that you were
No,
there?
I
Or
so I actually had already talked to Johnny about a contract extension for 1 more year. And
mhm.
we had met before I went home, and it wasn't long after that they decided that they were going to part ways with Johnny. I didn't have a contract. Kurt came in, and then basically well, I don't want to say cleaned house, but some of us
Right.
didn't get a contract. So I ended up going to Phoenix in the West
Right.
Coast League. And then at Christmas time, Johnny got a job in Telford and
Hmm.
called me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. So
Coming back.
that's how I ended up in Telford. Yeah.
And you were there's a couple of seasons in Telford. What was that like, and how did you figure out that it was time to start thinking about hanging up the skates?
Well, you know what? So James Manson was there, and I played with him in Manchester. Um, there was Johnny Lawless obviously was coaching. Um, Pally was there, Mark Pallister, because he had
Hmm.
played with us in Manchester as well. Dwayne Newman, I played junior with in Brandon in the Western Hockey League. So there was some guys that I knew, and yeah, and it was just an opportunity. Johnny said, come here. Um, you know, uh, we got a good team. We just need a couple more guys, and we ended up winning the Benson Hedges Cup that year. It was shortly after I got there. Actually, we won it in Guildford, and but I remember, so I was playing in the West Coast League, and we had a game. It was like the 19th of December. So I said, I'll play this game, and then I had told them that I had already signed back in England, and so, but I didn't have to be in England until the January 1st because there was a game on the 2nd. So I ended up playing the game in Phoenix, driving basically 3 days home from Phoenix, and then spending Christmas. And that was there. How much snow we get in Saskatchewan. That year there was no snow yet on Boxing Day. It was crazy.
Whoa.
So, but coming home, I was going through snowstorms. It was crazy. So, anyways, I go to leave. I went out New Year's Eve, went to leave the next morning to the airport, and there's this much snow on the ground. So,
Mm.
anyways, I got out of Dodge before the winter really hit that year, and I ended up landing, on the morning I think of the 2nd with UK time, and then drove all the way up to Fife, and we played in Fife that night in the Benson and Hedges, and so that was the finishing part of. I think that was the second leg, and then we played, 2 games against Guildford and ended up winning Benson and Hedges. But we had a good team too. We had, a
Yeah.
lot of guys I still keep in touch with. Yeah, yeah, it was
Nice.
good.
And then you ended your well, you didn't finish your hockey career in Telford. You had a few more seasons. And then yeah, kind of just give us a couple of minutes about what it was like just to think about, this is how I'd like to go out now, and how did you prepare yourself for your last game?
Well, you know what? The first year, like, because I played the second half of the year that first year in Telford, and then I came back the next year, and we had no inkling that first season in Telford that there was money problems. And then
Mm.
the next year it started out okay, and then things started happening, and then checks were bouncing, and then why didn't we get our checks today? And it got to I stuck it out till Christmas time, and my sister was playing on the women's national team. I mean, she played in the Olympics in '98, and that would have been my first year in Telford, I think, or maybe the second year. Anyway, it was Christmas time. She was playing in the Three Nations Cup in Finland, and she flew to England and spent Christmas with me and actually practiced with our team in Telford over the Christmas break. And at that time, I had made up my mind. You know what? I think I'm just going to go back home and play senior hockey, because each team in senior hockey will pay 3 imports, and they'll pay you a little bit, and then you can get a job and kind of start your life. And anyways, Fife were calling because Frank Morris was there. So the connection with Trafford. Todd Dudium was my winger in Telford, and he was getting contacted by Fife. So they wanted the two of us. And my dad, like I said, was from Perth. He worked in Kirkcaldy Hospital. Like it was kind of it would have been a good fit. I actually have a sister that lives in Edinburgh, so it would have worked out good, but I just had such a bad taste in my mouth that and some other things going on that I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to go home. Dutz went to Fife and he's still there coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and done very well for himself. But yeah, I ended up coming home, and then I ended up playing senior, and there's good senior leagues here. So I ended up playing in 3 Allen Cups, which is a national championship. I got to represent Canada in Japan in 2005, in the Nagano Cup, it was called, in the same rink. My sister won a silver medal in the Olympics in '98. So, I mean, I kept playing senior hockey for years, which, like I said, it's equivalent to like playing in Telford and stuff like that. But you're playing at home, and then I went to broadcasting school
Mhm.
and ended up with the company I'm still at today. I've been the manager here for 20 years, so
Nice.
it kind of worked out. But I've always still been involved in hockey.
So just to wrap this period up, apart from that, would you say that goal against Paisley in Manchester Arena was a highlight of your career, or what would you sum up as your pro career in the UK?
Personally, on a personal level, when I think back to just a single goal, that wouldn't have been the highlight. The highlight was winning the championship. I think that first year in Manchester, what we accomplished, the family atmosphere we had for a team, guys still keep in touch, like those things, like really, really stand out. And I remember that you're also playing a home and home with Cardiff, just two friendlies, and then I think we tied and beat them, and they were in the Premier League. So I mean that those were intense games because now we're going up to just play a couple friendlies against, John Lawless was a god in Cardiff. So, there was pressure to win. I mean those things, but if it's one thing, it would be winning the championship. Nothing replaces winning. I don't care what level you're at, but to win in front of that many fans and in that atmosphere. And the other thing about that first year too is Man United had players that were endorsing our team.
Yeah.
And I remember a day Lee Sharp was playing for Man United at the time, and he came to our practice, and I stayed out after practice and got him dressed up in kit, and he went out and tried to skate. And then there's a couple of us went to lunch with him at Starvin' Marvin's in downtown Manchester. And then I think it was the next week we got to go watch their training. But their training, it actually snowed that day and they were indoors. But
Mm,
watching them train, like Eric Cantona hitting a ball straight up in the air like a handball and catching it on his neck, and the things he
mm,
did, it's equivalent to us flipping it on our stick. David Beckham, I mean, his series just came out
yeah.
on Netflix, and that brought back so many memories because I think his first goal was against Galatasaray. I was at that game. It was my
Nice.
first ever football game, and I was at the game when David Beckham scored his first
Yeah.
goal. So, I mean, I just have so many memories.
I do remember Roy Keane being a fan of the hockey. So he was in a hotel bar after a hockey game or after one of their football games and after one of the hockey games, and we started talking because I told him I was on Sky. I actually started talking to his wife first, and then he came in. And I was like, "Oh, it's Roy Keane's wife." Oops! But then as soon as he saw the Sky Sports on my jacket, and I made quick friends with him talking about the hockey. So yeah, they're very special times for you, Martin. I'm glad that we got that period wrapped up. But let's head straight into the third period now, and it's the one that uh, it's one that was a struggle for me. A lot of people know that I was playing hockey in Guildford, but I was also on Sky Sports, and I was like having this real conflict of identity. And when I had to make that decision of stopping playing the sport with guys who would keep me accountable to all of a sudden being on TV, and I know that we're both, we love the TV and covering hockey and everything that goes with that. But I had this huge identity crisis, where all of a sudden I'm with a different team. I have no tools, no ability to deal with the pressures of being on live sports, but also the trappings that went with it, hanging out in nightclubs in Soho, and all of a sudden the drink and other things come into my life. And I had no ability to ask for help or a language to even ask for help or say that I'm struggling. Even though on the outside you'd say, oh, Nick drives a Porsche and he lives in London and he's on TV and he's got his own part of a company, and life was really good, but my purpose had gone. And that's really, Martin, why I wanted to do this podcast and to talk to people who quit playing. Well, it's funny, you did say get a real life earlier. You know, you said when you quit hockey, you use the term real life. And I know it's just a phrase that you throw out, but it is this idea of a hockey player, you know, all of a sudden getting into the normalcy of life, of just living, you know, and not maybe having the tools to do it or the fear around it. So I know you've had a very successful career in what you do, but what was it like for you when all of a sudden, like I know you had senior hockey, you
Yeah,
still had some hockey, but really the idea of like playing hockey in the UK is very unique, and you're seen as you know, people talk to you, and you've got this purpose. So can you describe, maybe, were there challenges? What was it like when you had to face the fact that you wouldn't going to play in Telford anymore in front of, you know, thousands of people?
for sure. Um, and I think that, I've talked to guys that were done playing in the NHL, and their biggest or their hardest transition was not going to the rink every day, not training in the summer. Like, you're together with your teammates all winter, then you're at the gym and training all summer with a purpose to be in shape for the following season. And all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. What's there to train for? Some guys still go to the gym and those sorts of things, but other guys can fall into a depression, and I know that's a big thing with the NHLPA, is talking about the transition period, and it's very tough. And for me, knowing that, I think I'm leaving the UK, especially how I left, because I left Telford where, like I told you, the checks were bouncing, and the team was in financial problems, and everything else. So I didn't want to go out like that, but I just was at the point where there's, things that had happened in my hockey career that I was just like, I'm just going home. I just want to play at home. So, and then you come home, but I go into broadcasting, and let's face it, like, the money is not good in radio. That it's, especially in an entry level position, in a smaller community. And so anyway, that being said, um, just the just knowing that, okay, now what am I going to do? Like, we all had aspirations of going far in broadcasting, but it's hard. It's hard to make that next step. So, for me, I ended up volunteering at the company I'm with. We had our own community channel. I volunteered as a host on a show, and then ended up getting a programming job, and then obviously became the manager. But for me, I did miss, you know, I'm somebody that always hangs on memories. Like, you can tell when I talk about Manchester, I talk about the things that I remember. People would say, "How do you remember that?" Because it was so important to me. And then all of a sudden, and I was lucky because I played on some really good senior teams that played in good leagues. And like I said, we went to the Allen Cup, which is national championship. I got to go to Quebec and play in one. Another one was only just in Lloydminster, um, but the other one was in Brantford, Ontario. Walter Gretzky's walking around the rink, at the time, like it. So so I was pretty lucky in that regard. um, Retiring from senior, I thought I was done at about 46. And I remember talking to the team, and I broke down. Like, I was like, this has just been so much a part of my life, and to not play again. And then the next year we go to a game and we're short. So, okay, well, I'll play, and then you end up playing 5 or 6 games. And then it kind of continued that. And I think for me, when I played the last senior game that I played when I was 51, so I turned 51 on the 10th of March. My mom passed away on the 16th of March. So I was so preoccupied with her not doing well, debating whether I should go to the game because I was the coach, but we had injuries and suspensions and I needed to play. And I played that last game, and I think because of everything else that was going on, it never hit me till afterwards. And I think I always thought, well, maybe I'd play another game. And then I just didn't. So, guys used to bug me because I was going to announce my retirement, I don't know how many times, and then kept playing. But I think I kept playing because it was the fear of not being a part of that. So I went back to coach senior in my hometown in 2016, and that first year I went to coach, um, we won the league. And so, that first year you're up here, and then, the next year, like we didn't win again, win the league after. We always had really good teams. But, then my son-in-law, he comes in and he plays. And he like we had a lot of players that had played pro and played junior, and it was like coaching a semi-pro team. And then this year I decided to take a step back, not coach the senior, start teaching again, like when, coaching U15. And so that's been good. I think because I've always been involved in the game, that it made the transition a little bit easier. But for me, and that 1-year-old on skates to the 51-year-old still playing, contact hockey, um, it's sad. It's sad that it has to come to an end. It definitely is. And um, I just think that, because I was be able to be involved in the game and the coaching side, and that it made the transition easier. But do I miss playing? Oh, absolutely. And I can totally see how it could be very easy um, to fall into that depression and fall into that side of it, because it's it's a way your life is. I remember playing junior, and a guy named Chico Resch, a goaltender, played in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
He came to speak to our team, and the one thing that he most passionately said was, "I miss the camaraderie in the dressing room. I miss the stories. I miss the poking fun at each other. Just the brotherhood type of thing." And that's the hardest thing. Then in life, we have our own kids, and I have 4 daughters. None of them played sports, so that's why I guess I got involved, and I coached U18 AAA for a few years. And I had some offers to go to coach at higher levels, but I had a good job. At the time when I was getting the offers, my wife had breast cancer. There was other things going on in my life that, I had to say, what's more important? You have a job with a pension, you have and all these things. Do you want, let's face it, coaches are hired to be fired. So,
Mm.
there's tough decisions to make, but I still think there's nothing like, you know, um, being part of a team, and with a common goal. And actually, it brings me to when I went back to Telford and Manchester in 2016. And the local guys like Tim Dempsey, Alan Huff, Mike Moran was still in Manchester. Some of my other buddies, they came to the pub and we got together, and it was like, what time's practice tomorrow? It was like no
Yeah.
time had passed. We'll go up to Telford a few days later, and we got the Plant brothers, and James Manson drives down from Cardiff, and we stayed with Tom Watkins, Andy Phillips, who was our trainer, equipment manager when I played there, still is to this day. He is with Telford. Tom's coaching there. We were all together, and we joked about, it feels like we have practice tomorrow.
Yeah.
So to almost go full circle back to what we started this interview talking about, is like no time had passed. And for me, I think if you can get together, and go back, I think that helps for sure. Like to just talk story like this. This is like the best thing, for
Mm.
me at this point in my life right now. This is you don't know how much this means to me, being able to talk about, the days in the UK.
It's beautiful to be able to hear it, Martin, and from a guy like yourself too that can explain it so well. And it makes me think, right? Like we didn't make it into the NHL. We didn't, I'm sure you got paid a little bit more than I did, but we didn't make millions or even hundreds of thousands or even, we didn't make a lot of money, but yet still considered a pro or a semi-pro. And
Yeah.
it's this idea that I really want to try to get across to people that it doesn't matter what level you play. The loss or the bereavement you have when you stop playing is the same at any level. the unfortunate thing is for me, I don't even remember my last game, you know, because it was so interwoven in a turbulent time of my life of just getting involved in drinking. Because I never drank as a player. I didn't, I grew up in an alcoholic household. I didn't want to drink. But at that time, you all of a sudden you're dealing with, that changing room where guys would have said, Nick, maybe you're drinking a little too much, or dude, take it easy. Like they would call you out on your BS to all of a sudden environment where no one really cares because they've not grown up in that environment where people are looking after one another. And I don't care what anyone
Right.
says, a hockey room looks after their brethren, whether or not you get along with guys or not. Someone's going to call you out on something if they think that you're going off the tracks a little bit. But at those higher levels, there will be support, and I think that definitely nowadays everyone's talking about the transition and life after the game. But when we played and there's just what no one was aware of it, and all of a sudden you have guys just feeling a little off. Like why do I feel off? And it's because of this loss, this lack of this team camaraderie and showing up at the rink, showing up for people. I can't stress to enough about what this is. Not just showing up for your paycheck, but showing up for a bunch of guys on a Tuesday or a Thursday night at 11 o'clock when the roof is sweating, and there's drips on the ice and it's miserable while raining outside and the dressing rooms are wet and damp, but you show up. And when you said you hold on to, you remember everything because they were important to you. Describe that. Describe the importance of these memories. Why is it important to Martin Smith to have these memories?
I think because it's everything that you put in to your life at that time, um, and it's all about life experiences. Like I think it's what molds you today. Like it's everything isn't roses. Like there's things that happen in your life over the course of your life that make you stronger. Um, they make you battle adversity. They hold you accountable. All those sorts of things that I think um, mold you into the person that you become. And the reason why they're so important to me is because they're memories of different people, different places, different times, different ups and downs that like I said, I think they define who you are in a sense. But here's the thing, at the end of the day, everybody measures success different. And I can't stress this enough, Nick, when I say I look up to you because you are successful. Where you are today and what you've been through, you are a success. And, for me, um, you know, I remember a story. Todd McClellan coaches the LA Kings. He coached in North Battleford. My dad was the president of the team at the time, hired him at 24, gave him an opportunity. But when you ask him what's his biggest um, accomplishment or what he's most proud of as a coach, he talks about a goalie that he had in junior that was way overweight when he saw him, and then saw him a few years later, and he was like healthy, never even barely recognized the guy. He said, to me, that's a success. Like that is the transition of being healthy and having, who knows what caused him to be overweight. Obviously, some things, could have been bothering him in his life, and he got control of that and became a healthy person. For me, I was asked this 2 months ago. What's your biggest, what are you most proud of being a coach? I was coaching a U18 AAA team. They went into a petrol station in Moose Jaw, and there was 14 of our players lined up, all had their stuff they were going to buy for the trip home. And a guy came in and he said, our players were saying, go to the front of the line. It's okay. You don't have to wait in line. Like you're going to be here a long time. And he insisted, no, my players are like, no. They told the cashier, take this guy first. The guy goes to the front and he pays for all my players' stuff. He ended up being the doctor for the Moose Jaw Warriors. That made me
Wow.
more proud, of anything that happened on the ice, because as coaches we helped mold those players into good young people. And to me, that's a success. So you can win all the Stanley Cups you want, like you can win, all the individual team awards and everything, but success is how you come through adversity. And for me, that's why I say that about you, Nick. And I've sent you messages over the years before, brief, but proud of you, man. Like, I can't stress that enough. And it is hard, and it is hard, that transition from not playing anymore to, a different style of life. But good on you, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I really do. It means a lot. I'm kind of going a little red, embarrassed. But
Yeah.
it's not about. This isn't about me. This is about you.
No, but it
But
gives me an opportunity to talk about that, because I think it should be said. And, especially when we're focused, in the third period here, talking about stuff like that.
I think what that that's what I want. I want this. I want people to be able to hear and recognize challenges that we've all faced. And again, I don't want people to go, "Oh, he didn't play in the NHL and he wasn't on Fox Sports." It doesn't really matter. But our hearts still miss something, and it's normally when that miss creates a bit of a hole, and all of a sudden you fill the hole with a drink or gambling or food or something, and that's the idea of addiction, is that you're filling it with something that's going to create negative consequences. And I know a lot of guys who've gone down that path, and they're kind of, and we can look down our noses at guys who maybe once drove a car, or again had a certain idea of what success is, right? Which is what I always thought, it was the material stuff. If I have this, then you're going to think I'm successful. My definition of success today is different. It's kind of like it's about the positive impact you make on people. That's the money in the bank, is if I've made a positive impact on somebody, and that's how I rate success. Um
Well, you know
and I
what,
think
Nick?
that's
Like, I knew when I met you, I knew our paths were similar. You had come from Saskatchewan. You had a British background. Um, that's what I think. You came up to me first and introduced yourself, and I thought, that's one thing. You probably don't remember that. I remember that because it was important to me. I was that new guy in Britain, and we were about the same age, and and that sort of thing. So sometimes we leave impressions on people that we don't even know. And and it's about our support systems too. I was really lucky. I have a very understanding, caring wife and family that have allowed me to continue in the game, because you're donating your time, and without them, you wouldn't we wouldn't be able to do that. And sometimes you go home and you're grouchy after a loss, and they kind of take the brunt of that. And but then they're there to celebrate the good times too. And I think that's part of the next part of your life, so to speak, is you have kids, you get married, you do all those sorts of things. And I remember when I was done playing hockey in Telford and was heading home, I'm panicking. I'm single. I got buddies at home that are married and they have 2 kids already. Like, am I going to end up by myself? Like,
yeah.
crazy things. But those are things that compound the I'm not playing pro anymore. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter the level you play, because I remember the championship we won in Pee Wee, and my sister was my D partner. I remember that. So it doesn't matter what, if that would have been the last level of hockey I ever played, I think I would still have that as the highlight of my career at that time. So it's all about the transition, and how we deal with it and how we overcome it. And I'm happy with where my life is today. And I'm, like I said, I'm coaching U15 AA. um Seeing the progress from them in a month so far, month and a half since tryouts, so rewarding. Because I didn't get, I don't have a team that team's going to win the championship. you know it was different. Like, how is this team going to do this year? Well, we're progressing every day, and that's life. You just one day at a time.
What a beautiful way to end the third period.
Right on.
Awesome. But I am going to do an overtime period with you. I'm going to bring you right back to First of all, I wanted to say something about you because you are just an absolutely lovely guy. You know, from the day that I do remember meeting you, I remember you even, you know, coming along to the Sky game and checking out the outside broadcasts and stuff, and you being the producer, and you were indicating like an interest in broadcasting. So number one, you showed an interest in broadcasting, and you got a career in broadcasting, and that just shows resiliency to me that you stuck to, you know, these ambitions and these dreams, which have kept you, I guess, in purpose, you know, through your life, where you've been able to contribute to either a hockey team or the company that you're working for. You've always been so polite, you know, like I can't ever imagine you going on a swearing rant. I don't know if that ever happens in your life, but you know, you're just such a nice guy, dude. And I know we have some common friends too, in North Battleford and Saskatoon, and they all speak so highly of you. You know, so you know, just thank you for just keep being kind. You know, I think that the world just needs more guys like you that are kind and compassionate. You're not afraid to be vulnerable, and these are gifts that I believe what, you know, particularly the young men that you're teaching, and that you're guiding. You know, this is what the world needs is strong men who are compassionate and vulnerable, not afraid to show emotions, express emotions, so that they can pass it on to the younger generation, and keep evolving this world, because I think we're all in a little bit, everyone's going a bit what's going on in the world. But the world needs guys like you, and I'm glad it does have men like you. And I want to bring you back to one of those memories that you had, and I suppose it being a message for anybody who is either an athlete, ex-athlete, or has young people in sport. Is you talked about going out for the Stanley Cup and boot hockey, and I remember those days so well. They are my funnest days of being out on the ice late at night when the outside rinks in Saskatoon, the lights have gone off. I'm there with a couple of buddies. We can barely see the tennis ball that we're playing with, because we don't want to play with pucks because we can't see them. You know, they're going to hurt us. We've got a
Right.
green tennis ball, and we're just playing for the Stanley Cup. It's game seven, it's overtime. And we played the game seven overtime probably three or four, like dozens of times in one night, just for the joy, Martin, just for the pure joy, the laughter, tears even freezing out, just laughing so hard we were crying. To that moment of, like, you know, playing pro and bringing the joy that you had with the original Manchester Storm team, and how important it was for you to have joy even at the highest levels, where thousands of people are coming to watch. And I suppose what I want to try to do is to any coaches or anything like that is to keep joy in the game.
Well, and I think that that's one thing I talk about, you know, a lot of times is the fact that um, I think that players improve because they're having fun and they enjoy coming to the rink. And you know, we've played for some tough coaches back in the day, you know, that I mean, it's so different now. It's positive. It's, you know, positive reinforcement. But when we played for the Stanley Cup in our driveway or on our backyard rink, we didn't have people, you know, telling us you need to go there or go here. You just went out and you had fun and you played with your buddies and you know, and that's why when we won in Manchester, it was like playing boot hockey or playing, you know, shinny, um, because you know it was fun. It was
Mm.
fun coming to the rink, and it was enjoyable being around your friends and your teammates. And you know, I think that that is the most important thing. Get on the ice as much as you can. I tell the young players, like, they're lucky still up in Edam, ice is vacant, you go out there and play, you know. And you know, my nephew is here playing with the Battlefords North Stars, and I, you know, they live out in Nova Scotia now. So him playing here for my old team has been really exciting. But Sunday morning I drive him up to Edam, you know, a couple times last winter when he was playing here, and we skated where his mom skated, you know, where
Mm.
she grew up. And those are memories I hope he'll never forget. I've done that with my daughter, you know, and all my daughters have been up there to skate. I mean, that's the joy of the game. And you know, I think if there's one more thing I'd like to make sure that we mention here is we do have a mutual friend. We did have a mutual friend in Bob Coral that I met when he was at Sky Sports. And Bob and I became really good friends back in Canada when he moved back and his son Michael ended up playing a season for me of U18 AAA. Mike is now a member of the Manchester Storm. And we had so many conversations, Bob and I, about how we could get Michael back to the UK and play. And we had talked to different people. And Bob sadly passed away, a couple of years ago. And I know how proud he would be of, because he knew you where you are in your life and where his son is in his life, playing for the Manchester Storm, playing in the UK. And when I watch games that I played on Sky Sports, it was Bob doing, the color on a couple of those broadcasts. And the hockey world's a small world. I always tell my players, don't burn any bridges. You be, a good person, and things will always work out. You never know who knows somebody else. And isn't it funny that, Bob, I end up coaching his son here. And actually, there's two other players playing in the UK right now. One other one is in Manchester. Evan Weniger is the goaltender. I coached him. So him and Mike are buddies. They're both playing for the Storm. Colin Shirley's in Fife. Um, you know, they're all three are Saskatoon boys. You talk about being proud of some former players there. There it is. But you know, and rest in peace, Bob. But the one thing I always took from him is he always called me pal, and I've kind of
Yeah.
continued that saying, thanks, pal. Have a good day, pal. Well, to you, thanks, pal, for having me on here, because this has been tremendous.
Yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful, buddy. And yeah, to Bob, a great man, and to the sport of hockey, like you say, it's just there's something magical about this game. There's something about the resiliency and the brotherhoods and sisterhoods that are created, around this great game. And thank you for joining me today. We'll dedicate this one to Bob.
Right on. Sounds good to me, pal.
Beautiful. All right, pal. Thanks for joining me, dude. Lots of love.
Yeah, thanks, you too, Nick. And you ever need anything, need to chat, give me a call. I'm here, and I know we'll touch base again soon.
We will. Take it easy, brother.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.